Thank you, Kathy. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and see some of you that I've met before, but many of you I haven't met before. And I thank Kathy for that introduction, because I am going to talk about telehealth and connected care probably in a way that you haven't really thought about it before. And that's not to say that what you have thought about or are doing is not important, but it is to illustrate the point that things can be a little broader than that. So why don't we get started? So just a little bit about the FCC. I think most people know about the FCC, but they don't really get why the FCC is even involved in healthcare, and even I didn't 3 years ago before I started working for them. But in fact, they've been involved in healthcare for quite a while. Just like the FDA regulates all medical devices, how many of you knew that the FCC also has a certification or regulation for devices? Few of you did. Any device, not just medical, any device that has a wireless component, it has to get an FCC certification, just like a medical device has to get an FDA approval. So they've been in healthcare for a while, but not that much. But as our world becomes more wireless enabled, broadband enabled, their purview is growing. And only one problem, they're an agency of lawyers and engineers, so they don't know that much about healthcare. And I'm dead serious. They are great people, but they admit that outside of occasionally being a patient or having a parent or a sibling that's a patient, they don't know that much about healthcare. And when I started really working with them, and I'll talk briefly about some of the things they do, some of the definitions that they're using or understandings of healthcare come out of the Social Security Act of 1964, and a few of them come out of the Telecommunications Act of 1937. I'm not kidding you. I wish I was. So at any rate, so the Connect2 Health Task Force is now the umbrella for all health-related activities at the FCC. And the vision of the Connect2 Health Task Force is one where everyone is connected to the people, information, and supports they need to get healthy or stay well, period. Anytime, any day, anybody, anywhere, period. That's the future we see. And as that implies, this goes far, far beyond providing traditional point-to-point healthcare services by telephone or secure email or video or even a mobile device. But the reason we have that perspective really actually does stem from the Telecommunications Act of 1937. If any of you have read it, and I hadn't, but it basically was put in place to say the FCC's charge from Congress is to ensure that every single American has access to telephone service at reasonable cost, good telephone service at reasonable cost. Well, that vision, that original mandate has been reinterpreted several times. When radio came out, it was morphed to include radio. Why? Partly because radio goes across the spectrum that they regulate. When television came out, same thing. It was reinterpreted to make sure everybody could have television, every single American. And then when computers came out, same thing. Everyone have a computer. Then the internet, and now most recently, it's broadband internet, not just slow internet, broadband internet. But in the way the current chairman, Tom Wheeler, expresses it, it's not just about ensuring everyone has a broadband connection. It's about ensuring that everyone can benefit from what broadband has to offer. Think about that for a minute. That's pretty powerful. That just is a game changer in the way you think about what the purview of the FCC is and what it does. And it's not just focused on healthcare by any means. This is in all sectors across all categories. And if you have a chance, you can look up the National Broadband Plan. It was commissioned by Congress and written a few years ago. We will be updating it, but it gives you this broad roadmap of where things can go in all sectors of this country through a broadband and a connected backbone. But this is where we start start at the FCC, so you can see from the very beginning it's much broader than what some people are thinking about. Let me just tell you about a few health FCC programs. Obviously, I've alluded to spectrum regulation. Some of you may have heard of net neutrality and that whole thing, and that has a profound impact on healthcare. I won't spend time there. I talked about device certification. The Rural Healthcare Program, how many of you have heard of that program? So most of you have. I won't say much, $400 million a year program to stand up telehealth services, and not all that money gets used every year, so there's more money there, and it often pays for things. Kathy's nodding her head, she knows about this well, doing some outstanding things at UVA. And you've gotten some of the funding, right? Yeah, I thought you've gotten lost, right. But let me tell you a little secret, only about half of it gets used every year. $200 million just laying on the table, waiting for people to apply for it. And it's grant money, it's not loan money, and it pays for things other NIH funding or other funding typically doesn't pay for, right? So ask Kathy if you don't believe me. The Lifeline program, you might have heard about that. There's just some action about this a few years ago. It's also euphemistically known by some as the Obama phone program. There was some abuse of the program in the past, but the program has been revamped, and the FCC just voted on it March 30th at their last meeting. Basically now, what it does, it provides a subsidy to the telecommunication, to the phone carriers, so that low-income individuals in the past could get telephone service. What we did to revamp, there was a problem though, and it was said that people were abusing it, and one home would have 9 phones, and there was some of that, but there was also abuse on the providers, on the telecom provider side. The people who had to certify you were low income were the phone companies. Little bit of a conflict of an interest there, right? So the more people, they want more people on it. So now the people who certify are not the telephone companies, and now it's not just for voice, it's also for broadband services. So you may be hearing more. So and that's just a few. I mean, I'm not going to talk about all those. I'm going to talk about this last point for the rest of my talk. A very important part that the chairman has actually charged the task force specifically to do, but for the whole FCC, is really catalyzing and enabling the future. Well, what's the future? Well, that's why we talk to you. We've been going around the country visiting Karen and others to see what they're doing, to think about, and not just them, talking to industry, talking to Google, talking to Microsoft, talking to everybody, and thinking about it, thinking about deeply where we are, where we need to be, what needs to happen, and not from the perspective of the healthcare system or from a telemedicine provider, but from the perspective of what needs to happen so that everyone can be connected to whatever they need to be healthy whenever they need it. All right, so we have, just briefly, we have a whole bunch of really big problems coming together that make this even harder to do. One, the prevalence of chronic disease is just through the roof. I don't have to spend a lot of time talking about that to this crowd. The burgeoning senior population, very soon, by 2020, I think 1 out of every 5 people living in this country will be over the age of 65. And just a few years after that, we'll have about 82 million people over the age of 85. People are living a lot longer. And part of the reason that's a problem is seniors often have, the healthcare system today struggles dealing with 1 chronic disease at a time. Seniors have on average from 2 to 5 at the same time concurrently. Increasing longevity, rising healthcare costs, healthcare provider shortages. You guys know about this well. Shortages, physician shortages are estimated to be by 2020 as high as 100,000, depending on whether you're looking at primary care, specialty care, or both. Nursing shortages have been estimated to about 2030 to be about 800,000 short, and that's just nurses and doctors. And the last one is a growing populations of minorities and immigrants and underserved, which the healthcare system struggles with today. Is telehealth the answer to all those problems? What do you think? Oh, see, this is a prime crowd. Most of the time, I got 1,000 doctors like, no, that's not the answer. Doctors are the answer, or something else. But it's okay, you guys get it. So, but what I always say when they say that, okay, if it's not the answer, what is the answer? And that's the answer I always get. There is no other answer. You have to think, thinking about those problems without thinking about connected health and telehealth and all there's, in my mind, it becomes hard to think how you're going to solve it without doing that. Take it off the table if you want to. How are we going to touch everybody that needs to be touched? When they need to be touched, not just when they can get in to see me or when they have insurance, when they need to be touched over the course of their lifetime. And then when they're not touching us. That's a big problem with the healthcare system today. As I tell my medical students, I used to teach at Hopkins, when you come into our ICUs, we can tell you how many red blood cells are in your left eyelid. But when you leave the hospital, you basically, historically, I know it's changing, but historically, you basically are non-existent to the system until you can somehow get back into the system, either through an emergency room, a doctor's office, a clinic, or something like that. And if you think about a lifespan over the course of 60, 70, now 80, 90 years, my mother-in-law is living with me now. She is 97 years old and just losing her eyesight, but other than that, still up and around and getting strong. When you think about it like that, how much time does anybody spend in front of a doctor or a nurse in a healthcare system over the course of their lifespan? 3% of their lives, 5% of their lives, 10% if they're really sick. So even if we make healthcare system perfect, absolutely perfect, we're only influencing about 5% of the time and have no influence over the other 95% of the time. If that's the case, how successful can we be? You see, and that's the problem, the biggest problem that patients are crying out for. You're fine when I go to you, but in the middle of the night, what do? When the doctor's office is closed and I can't get to an ER or I don't have insurance and I still have to do something. This is the problem that we have to address. So that brings me to information and communications technologies are transforming society and revolutionizing every fact of American life, including how we shop, bank, and even elect our presidents. Those aren't my words. The Pew Internet and American Life Project, a fascinating, very, very good program that does a lot of work in understanding where technology is leading and taking us, not just in healthcare, but in healthcare as well. Technology is having a disruptive impact on society. Many people talk about disruptive technology. It's almost an overused term, but most people talking about disruptive technology don't really know what they're talking about. The term actually comes from Clayton Christensen, Harvard professor, Harvard Business School professor, who wrote a book. Well, he originally came out with it in 1995, and then wrote a book in 1997. If you haven't read it, get it. It's a good read. It is called one of the 6 most important books about business and innovation ever written. It's called The Innovator's Dilemma, and the subtitle is When Technology Causes Leading Firms to Fail. The bottom line is, what he says is, when you have market leaders, and he wasn't talking about technology like we're talking about it today, he was talking about new innovations, and he first applied this to other sectors and now has applied it to healthcare as well. But what he's saying is, when you have market leaders in any sector, in any economy, those leaders, after they gain that market dominance, tend to use their power to protect their purview, right? To keep staying dominant. And then they also become less responsive to their customers. They become over-focused on the current needs of their customers, or what they believe that are, and do not focus on their future needs. And so that allows other innovators to come up with things that may not be quite as good as what the dominant players are saying they're doing to address those things. And then they discount, oh, you don't want to go there. That's not a good service. Come to us. We charge a premium, but it's the best quality service you can get. Well, in the eyes of the public, it's good enough. And more importantly, it's much less expensive, much less expensive. So over time, rapidly then, more of the customers shift to them. And by the time the market players figure it out, It's too late. They can't even innovate fast enough. They're too big and they fail. How many of you have ever heard of Woolworth and Woolco? Where are they now? Gone. That's right. They were dominant players and I could cite so many examples of that. And I'll come back to you again. I'm making a prediction. Within the next 5 to 10 years, and probably closer to 5, one or more, and I'll prove this to you the rest of the talk, one or more of our major academic medical centers will fold or substantially undergo revisions. Why? Because of disruptive innovation. I've seen it even at Johns Hopkins. I've been there for the last 25 years. And some things, they're leading the nation, but others are saying, no, we do it better. We do it better. I remember hearing one time the CEO was on a news NPR, actually, and they were talking about healthcare and healthcare costs. And he had him and a few other people, and the host turned to him, and he said, why is healthcare, especially at our elite institutions, so expensive? The studies are coming showing it's so expensive, but it's not necessarily better than all of the other places. And he spent the rest of the time, well, we take the most complex patients and all this kind of stuff and all the stuff we usually say, but it wasn't working. You know, at the bottom line, at the end of the day, it's too expensive and it's not that much better. And insurance is just not going to continue paying for it. And, you know, and I'll illustrate this, they have, what can a place like Hopkins or maybe even UVA, what can they pivot to make up that money when this stops coming here? Not much. Okay, so let me just again say where we are. We're talking about the use of telecommunications technology, all of them, a whole bunch of kinds. They're not just any one to improve health or enhance health. On the clinical side as well as on the consumer side. I will talk more so on the consumer side, not because I'm discounting the clinical side, but because I think a real problem is that there are not enough people within the healthcare system thinking about the consumer side. Well, on the one side, we say all of what we do is about the consumers, and at some level that's true. But it's one thing for me to say what my patients need. It's another thing, and every time I did this in the past, I was partially like, but asking the patients what they say they want, you'll get a different answer sometimes, many times actually. And then we're talking about internet and broadband and some other things that I'll highlight. All right, so here's where we are. Telehealth, in my opinion, will, but actually already is, significantly change how healthcare is even defined itself, where it's practiced, who provides it, when it can be provided, the cost of providing it, and thereby provide significant opportunities to improve national health and enable us to reach our national health goals. In another talk, I put to address disparities too, because I think that's true as well. All right, so let me start proving to you. I think there's like 4 ways I'll talk about. One is who are the providers and who's providing it. In the past, historically, providers are those that provide services delivered by highly trained medical specialists. Those are the people who provide healthcare services. Well, if you think for a minute, again, as we're going forward, and now as, you know, with healthcare reform and, you know, length of stays at hospitals drastically shrinking and advances of telehealth, and again, what I talked about, how often or how much a proportion of somebody's time are they in front of the healthcare provider, the traditional healthcare provider, who's really providing most of the healthcare to any real patient in this country? Family and non-family caregivers. Overwhelmingly providing more care, and now even more complex care. There's a couple of reports that just came out saying unequivocally caregivers feeling stressed out, overworked, and not only underappreciated, but totally unprepared to deal with what their doctors are requiring them to do and their patients and their family members need them to do. And they talk about not just simple things, bandage changes, but they're changing G-tubes. They're doing all kinds of stuff that we wouldn't even fathom, and they have to do them at home. They don't get any training. They don't get very little support from the traditional healthcare system. And I'm going to make this point over and over again. They're not just sitting down and saying, oh, the healthcare system is not giving. They're going other places to get it. And this is another part of my issue. If we, the healthcare system, don't get our acts together, the customers will go other places. And that's the part of the disruption. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So what else am I talking about? Caregivers and patients, as I said. But that's not the end of the story. How many of you know what an avatar is? More and more people, when I first used to talk about it, nobody knew what it was. But yeah, for those of you who don't know, these avatars are computer-generated images of people that, popularized by the movie Avatar, but they don't have to look like that, that are programmed to interact with you. And there are hospitals already using, it's still a little experimental, but there are places that are already using, when you come into, say, the ER or a doctor's office, instead of talking to a clerk or a nurse or something to triage you as to what you need or where you might go, you talk to a computer screen with a computer-generated person on there. That's the avatar. And the avatar has the ability to see you, to recognize you. Hi, how can I help you? I meant to bring a clip of this, but I didn't have it. But it's amazing. In that case, there's no healthcare provider involved in the interaction at all, changing entirely what we mean, but yet providing some basic levels of healthcare. And as you think about it, we'll talk more about intelligence that we can build into computers. The things that these things can do can become more and more complicated. Virtual reality and AI. The difference between avatars and virtual reality, avatars are minimally interactive. Virtual reality totally changes your world. It's what they call immersive experience. And most of you have only thought about this in the context of gaming. But I'm going to show you something and talk to you a little bit about something, an artificial intelligence that really it can have, so I read an article this week about how virtual reality, augmented reality, which is similar, and artificial intelligence could blow up healthcare. And then robotics. Robotics, again, most of you robotics have been in healthcare for a while. I trained as a surgeon. There's been robotic surgery going on for a long time, but it's not anything cool, or it's cool, but it's not, it's sort of, what, Rob, this group I don't have to explain that to. So, but what I'm trying to say today, where robotics is now, or where it will soon be, is far beyond where the Da Vinci robot or the other things are in surgery right now. Anybody know who this is? Anybody know? Not Lucy. It's Scarlett Johansson, right? That's a robot. That is a robot does it look like her? A lot of people on the internet thinks it looks like her. That's a robot of today that is built. But I didn't blow your mind yet. That robot was built by a Joe in his house using a 3D printer. So I'm not even talking about stuff that has to happen at Johns Hopkins. But think about if this same Joe, he's in Tokyo, so he's not a dumb Joe, and it's voice activated. Think about if he had some medical knowledge, what he could program her to do and to interact. That's a robot. 2, the definition of healthcare. What is healthcare itself? How is it changing, or how will telehealth and connected care actually change it? Well, in the past, healthcare is the provision of medical services. Okay, ever heard of Dr. Google? Now, some of you are laughing, and I know why, but it is documented now that more people search Dr. Google and use online resources for health information and support. It's not just health information. More people do that than consult their doctors. And that was first documented in 2010. almost 6 years ago, over 6 years ago. More people. Now, they value what the doctor says more than Dr. Google, but they can't get to the doctors. That's the problem. Or they have to lose money from taking a day off of work, or they don't have insurance. And so they are not just sitting by until we figure it out how they can get to us. They're going other places. And you guys have probably seen or heard the studies that are several studies looking at how good Dr. Google is. For some things, he's not so bad, actually. For some things, he's not so good. But that's not the point. People are going there. Is Dr. Google providing health care? Is Dr. Google changing the definition of what health care is? Will the Google or Alphabet, which is the new incarnation of the health part of Google, if it's changing the definition, will they be a health care provider for which they should be able to be reimbursed through Google? The rise of health apps. You laugh, but there are people dead serious about this stuff. This is what I'm trying to say. This is not something, everything I'm talking about today is either already happening, somebody's working on it, or all the components are there, they just haven't been put together. None of this is in that far in the future that I'm going to talk about today. The rise of health apps. There are now, I lost track of the number every time I look, the number of health apps going up and up and up and up. Most of them, as you know, don't get used, and most of them don't get used a long time, but some of them do get used quite a bit. And some, studies are beginning to come out to look at their efficacy. Some work well or better than others, some don't. How many, we'll stop there because everybody's sort of familiar with that. Here's wearables, edibles, embeddables. How many of you have heard of all of these kinds of things? More and more. Obviously, edibles, things you can eat. The edible pill, if you've heard of that. Embeddables, things that actually get implanted in you. I've heard of hearables. There are also all kinds of things. Are these things healthcare? They are? How many of you would call a Fitbit healthcare? Changing the definition of healthcare. See, again, you're sort of a primed audience. In other audiences I talk, nobody's hand goes up. Well, let me show you. This came out April 6th. It was in the news. Headline, Fitbit helps doctors decide to electrically cardiovert a patient. Fitbit. What happened? A patient had a seizure and was taken to the hospital by emergency. He had no family members there, so a poor historian couldn't do anything, was in AFib. The docs didn't know, is this chronic AFib or is this acute AFib? And, the treatment differs for the two. The guy had a Fitbit on. They decided to look at the data in the Fitbit. This is what they saw. You can, the heart rate data, beats per minute. You can clearly see where there was a change in the beats per minute, and that correlated with the onset of the seizures. And they said, well, that documents this is an acute episode, Cardiovert, and the patient went home fine that night. Is that healthcare? Should the Fitbit company be reimbursed for that, or should the hospital and the doctor be reimbursed for that? It's changing what healthcare is. Where healthcare happens. Historically, healthcare happened in hospitals. You guys know all about this. That's what telehealth is all about, right? How many of you, so I'm not going to talk about what you do. How many of you heard of Second Life? A few. Second Life is an online virtual world. About 10 years ago, I met at a conference similar to this the guy who started Second Life. He was he's not an MD, not a PhD. He was a master's level trained lab assistant at MIT, who was working with very bright PhD and doctor's level investigators in virtual worlds and things like that. He decided to quit and start this thing he called Second Life, which was this online world, but he made it simple. Think about disruptive technology again. Before, you had to be a computer genius trained in all kinds of code to sort of think about this. He made it simple for anybody to go online and create their own virtual worlds and do whatever they want. And this is where avatars really started to get popular. You could have yourself in that world, but you could look like whatever you wanted to look like. If you wanted to look like Queen Diana, you could look like Queen Diana. If you want to look like a fire-breathing dragon and fly through the air, you do that. We laugh, but 10 years ago, when I heard him give this talk, he said at that point, about 250,000 people across the world were signing up per month to use this, every last one of them paying real money to buy virtual real estate to do whatever they want with. Now, that's not even the end of the story. I used to run a blog and talked about this sort of thing. And when I talked about this, I had a number of providers across the world tell me that they provide healthcare services through Second Life. And guess what? Some of you are saying, you get the disdain and all, I can hear it. Guess who has real estate in Second Life? Johns Hopkins, University of Virginia, every academic medical center, every academic center, everybody has real estate in Second Life now because that's where people are. Counselors are setting up counseling and people come in looking like dragons and saying they're just divorced and having a problem, and cognitive behavioral therapy is being given in Second Life by somebody in India or Pakistan or China for that matter, it doesn't matter, and they pay real money and they go home and nobody ever saw anybody in what they really look like. This is happening now and has been happening for a long time. Second Life. Holoportation, another very, very new concept. This one, I'm going to show you this. This one has been, Microsoft just announced it. And you might have heard of teleportation from Star Trek and other kinds of things, and we're not quite there yet, beam me up, Scotty, but this is the closest thing. They can actually now have me and have an image of me and put it actually anywhere in the world, and the person in front of me actually see me and I'm moving around and interacting with me as if I was there. As if I was there. And when I show you this, think about it in the context, think about it in the context of healthcare, where you can now put a provider anywhere or bring a patient anywhere. Smart cars, smart homes, smart care. I'll talk about that. That I think, and IoT, the network effect. Let's run this video today because it's just about 3 or 4 minutes long.
Hi, today we're going to show you an exciting new technology that could fundamentally change the way that people will communicate in the future. Imagine being able to virtually teleport from one space to another in real time. Hey, Sergio.
Yes, Ram.
How does it feel like to be holoported?
It feels great to be holoported.
So if Sergio is to wear his HoloLens device, and I'm going to wear mine, we can see each other in full 3D in real time. We can interact and communicate as if we're co-present. Sergio, can you walk around my space?
They look like they're standing next to each other, don't they?
So we're doing everything to give the impression that Sergio and I are present in the same space. Sergio, let's just do a high five. That's great.
Bye.
Thank you, Sergio. We call this technology holoportation. Now, to make all this happen, we've had to create a new type of 3D capture technology. I'm surrounded by these 3D cameras that we've developed in our team. Each of them is capturing me from a separate viewpoint, and we're fusing this data together to create a temporally consistent model, as you can see reconstructed live behind me. Now, the camera that's filming me has a HoloLens tracking system attached, and this allows us to take these 3D models and composite them in real time into the real world, as you can see here. And that gives you a sense of the fidelity of the reconstructions that we can achieve. Once we have these reconstructions, we can texture them. We can then compress the data and transmit the data over to the other side. Over on the other side, a user wearing a HoloLens can see these remote participants live in their space as if they're co-present. And that's what we're showing you picture in picture. Now imagine using this type of capture technology to connect with family members who are thousands of miles away. And that's exactly what we're going to demonstrate to you right now. My daughter is stood in a similar capture rig somewhere else in our lab. And she's going to holoport into my space, and I'm going to interact with her wearing my HoloLens.
Hi, Bob, I miss you.
Hey, Lilia, I miss you too.
You coming home?
I'm coming home very soon. Let me get out of your way. Hey, Lilia, you can only hear me, you can't see me, but what are these toys?
I have toys to show you. This one is named as Elmo.
Elmo?
And he can sing.
He can sing, wow. And what about the other one?
The other one is called Tina, and I like it because it has different stuff.
Well, that's so cool. So Lilia, can you climb up on this chair that's behind you?
Climb?
Yeah, climb up. Be very careful. Now I'm going to count to 3 and I want you to jump. 1, 2, 3, jump! That was so cool. Oh, let me get out of your way again.
I like you so much.
I love you too.
I'm home soon.
I'll be home very soon. Bye-bye. Now, in that example, we were demonstrating live 3D capture, but our system is capable of another thing. We can actually record and play back that entire session. Now, this is almost like reversing through time. And if I wear my HoloLens device, it's almost like walking into a living memory that I can see through another pair of eyes from all these different perspectives. And because this is 3D content, we can miniaturize it onto this coffee table and experience it in a more convenient manner. And this becomes a magical way of experiencing these live captured memories. Now imagine being able to teleport to any place with anyone at any time. And that's what holoportation is all about. Thank you for watching.
You stop. Yeah, I told you I was going to blow your mind, right? Okay. Again, this is it's still investigational, but they're doing it. They just did it for you. But why is this important to healthcare? Is this something cool I found on the internet? Who did this? Who did this? Microsoft. Why is that important? Microsoft also makes what? It makes the Xbox, right? You ever heard of that? Again, those of us in healthcare don't spend a lot of time thinking about Xboxes. We should. About 10 years ago, I was at a medical meeting, I had to speak, and there were actually 2 meetings at the same hotel, and I stumbled into the wrong room. The meeting, I shouldn't have been in the room, but I didn't know that until the people started talking. And but it was one of the most fascinating, this was 10 years ago. It was a meeting of the chief medical officers of the nation's largest businesses and corporations. So CSX, IBM, all these huge corporations. At that time, they were already saying healthcare, and these were all self-insured, right? So they were already saying healthcare was becoming their biggest bottom line dollar, influencing their business. And I heard one after one saying, we are not going to sit by and let healthcare ruin our business. In other words, we're not going to sit by as healthcare costs continue to go up in healthcare and we can't afford it and it kill our businesses. But more than that, they said those chief medical officers working for those industry players said they are going to define healthcare of the future. I heard that 10 years ago. And then one man in particular was the head of Sony Nintendo, which is now part of Microsoft or has close agreements with Microsoft. At that time, he said, and he had, I don't know if it was the Game Boy or one of them, very popular device. He said, we are going to transform this device and make it for everyone. We're going to have something even your grandmother could play. And a lot of people laughed at that, but I thought, seriously, I said, wait a minute, this guy understands something that most people are missing. It's not that he's going to make a shoot 'em up for grandma, but if grandma, whatever it is, wants to knit or to sew or to whatever, he's going to do that, so grandma will use his device to do whatever she wants. And that began to click in my mind about healthcare. It's just a next step, and they're already thinking about it, about using the device for healthcare. Why do I say that? How many households in America have a gaming device? Anybody have any clue? 2/3? How many think that's too high? I looked it up 2 minutes before I came up here. 80% of households have a gaming device in them. 80% of households. And 56% of households has the latest gaming device. That's more than half of the households. And when Sony puts this technology into their gaming device, which is exactly what they're going to do, overnight, 56% of the households will be able to have a doctor in their house or the patient go to the hospital whenever they want to. Changing things? Changing things? You can think about how much ramifications these things have, and this is exactly what they are thinking about. And they don't have to worry about reimbursement. They'll just hire the doctor and pay him, and then they'll just do it. We'll talk more about that before I close. Smart care. So we are living in a time where we're hearing about smart cars. You know, Google's got autonomous cars that drive themselves, but they're already thinking about trying to build in things that make the car be able to take your blood pressure, take your heart rate, you know, all kinds of things. We're talking about smart homes, keep patients from falling and other things, and smart cities, making city services digital and more responsive to what patients need. But in some point in the future, your smart home is going to be connected to your smart car, which is going to be connected to your healthcare system. And we already see some of this in apps and other things, right? It's pretty cool when you wear a Fitbit or you wear something and it tells you your heart rate is up or your blood pressure is up. And that's what we call smart now. But from my perspective, that's not really smart. That's better than what we could do before because we had nothing. But why is it not smart? I mean, put on your clinician's hat and you can tell me in a minute. If I tell you your blood pressure is up, does that tell you enough to know what to do? No, there's a million reasons your blood pressure could be up. What's really smart is if I could tell you what your blood pressure is up, why it's up, and what you need to do about it, right? Well, smart care, connecting homes, that's where many people who talk about connected care are talking. Doing care that allows the thing or the other person to tell me something about me, about you or your health. That's one level of healthcare. That's what initial healthcare connected things will be able to do. But that's not where the true power is, in my view. It's really more at the network level, this IoT, which is another overused term, Internet of Things. But when you connect these things together, then you can also collect data not only about the physiologic parameter, but around associated parameters, and then be able to tell why something is up or develop properties about the thing you're trying to follow. The network of care systems, not just hospitals, that enables healthy environments that are proactive, predictive, personalized, and passive. And I'm not talking about personalized medicine. I'm talking about something beyond that. Let me give you one quick example. So again, imagine in your mind, we have this connected world. We got telehealth providers connected to hospitals, hospitals connected to smart cars, to smart homes, in smart cities. And that's where we're living right now, which is not that far away. I was on a panel last week at University of Maryland Technology Center with a developer who does smart home building right now. So let's say you have an asthmatic patient, right? And I use this example a lot. I used it last week and got a standing ovation. I'm not expecting that here. I'm just letting you know, because you guys are sensitized. But at any rate, and the way I tell it, I have two friends who are now dead because they as younger kids, because they couldn't get to their puffers fast enough, right? So that normally you take the two puffs of the inhaler, or you go to the hospital, you get a nebulizer, which is moist air, and albuterol or some other medicine in it, right? So let's say you're living in this future world. You come into your house, your smart home, and the patient begins to have increased work of breathing. Not a frank asthma attack yet, and maybe before they even recognize it. It may be an asthma equivalent. But the system is able to detect that. It detects that you have a possible likelihood of impending asthma attack because of increased work of breathing, and then it automatically raises the humidity in the room that you're in. Well, that's part of the nebulizer treatment that you would get at the hospital, right? And then if that is not enough to avert it, out of the vents where you normally get heat, it puffs albuterol out at the concentration you need in that room to make it go away. You've averted now an asthma attack before you even knew you were about to have one and you didn't go anywhere to get health care. That's what the network can do, because it's not just telling you, oh, your blood pressure is up. It knows something has changed. It knows why it has changed. And because of programmed algorithms that were programmed by the healthcare field, it knows what to do about it, and it can do about it. But the most important thing about that example is that what did we actually change? What did we actually treat? The environment. We went from treating just the patient to treating the environment. We changed the environment, raised the humidity, gave the albuterol. The healthcare system today cannot do that. Cannot do that. And we know that the environment in which people live, play, sleep, and work has a profound impact on their health regardless of their genetics. We don't like to admit it. We spend a lot more time talking about genetics, but it is a fact of life. Social determinants of health increasingly are being shown and believed to be much more important. And I read a report where it says only about 15% of actual health outcomes is due to the healthcare system. So again, being able to treat just the patient is great and needed and will be there. But moving to the place where we can treat the environment is truly exponentially powerful. All right, let me finish up here. Healthcare costs. Why will this help? In the beginning, all technology is expensive, obviously. But as time goes on, prices drop precipitously, and that's why economies of scale, once you have the networks in place, it's just moving a few more electrons around. It's not changing a whole lot if we have the broadband infrastructure in place and other things that we need. But the last thing, let me just talk about retail healthcare, because I think if nothing else, this ought to be shaking the boots of traditional healthcare more than anything else. And retail healthcare is happening largely because of telehealth, internet, broadband, and all these kinds of things. But you know what retail healthcare is, but it's beyond the sort of CVS and Walgreens at the corner of healthy and happy. It's that, but that's their slogan, really. I think it's actually, from a consumer perspective, pretty good. But it's beyond that. I think it was 2 years ago, I read in the paper that Walmart said that in the future, in the next 5 years, 2 years ago, they want to become the primary care provider of choice in America. Oh, you might laugh. They have 5,800 stores that and they're located in most neighborhoods where most people live. And overnight, they could become healthcare providers if they went that way. But even more than that, they can afford, if they need to lose money on telehealth services and make it up on the fresh fruits and vegetables or the other things you buy on the way home. And this is what I'm talking about. How can an academic medical center compete with that? What can they make it up on if they're not getting the money for the thing that they say they're charging at a premium? They cannot. They cannot. But it goes beyond that. I have had meetings from the FCC with another player that's even bigger than Walmart that is interested in getting into this game. You may have heard, they're not saying a lot yet. Anybody have any wild and crazy ideas? You don't even think healthcare for this one, but any ideas? Bigger than all of that. Bigger than Walgreens. Bigger than the VA. I'll tell you, the United Postal Service. What are they thinking about? Well, I bet you want to know now, huh? Well, first, a little history. As you know, for reasons that you may be debatable, they have been losing money for a long time. Not because they're not making money, but because of some laws and some other things, they're not making money. So they're looking for more revenue, right? Okay, what are their organizational assets? And I didn't know this until they asked me to come speak to their higher ups and talk to them about this sort of thing. So I had to do some research. They actually have a postal retail outlet, a post office, that is in the community within 5 minutes drive of 95% of the households in America. 95%. Not only that, they are the only business in America, that can touch every single business and residential address in the country. FedEx uses them, DHL uses them. They're the only company that can get to where you live anytime, any day. 3, they have the largest mobile fleet, cars, trucks, of any company in America, almost 250,000 automobiles. And finally, they have about 8,000 letter carriers on foot. They have 8,000 people walking to homes already. What if those people were carrying more than letters? What if they did more than just deliver letters? They checked blood pressures, or they did, any other number of variety of low-grade health. Actually, when I began talking to them about this, I said, you know what? Already, we're the first people to know when there's a health problem because we're visiting the homes every day. And if we see the mail piling up and we go in, or sometimes they say, come in and help us. This makes sense, but I'm not done. What if those postal delivery trucks that you see during the day are dually purposed? At night, they just sit in the garage, but were used to transport patients to wherever they need to be to get the health care that they need. When you begin to start thinking about this kind of option, I've got a choice. Go to Johns Hopkins and wait 8 hours in the emergency room, or go to my local post office and see somebody through telehealth immediately. What do you think patients are going to do? Oh, we love you, Johns Hopkins, but let me tell you, my friends, and without having an ability to cost shift the way Walmart, the way the Postal Service, the way others can, healthcare needs to be shaking in their boots, because I've used these examples specifically to show you not just that it's possible, but number 2, that consumers are already going there. We don't have to create a market for this. They're already going there in large numbers. And if we don't respond, if we don't lead the charge, then it's going to be the social entrepreneurs and the innovators and the folk looking for money only. And there's nothing wrong with looking for money. But I believe firmly that we need more people who have bona fide healthcare backgrounds and trainings on this side of the coin, just like we have on that side of the coin, so that the health outcomes can be what they should be. Retail healthcare will drastically lower the costs of what patient and insurance companies actually have to pay. And academic health centers may not be able to compete, some of them. So, in closing, over time, there exists real potential to make significant impact towards the goal of improving health, lowering healthcare costs, improving access, improving disparities, you name it, whatever it is, if we get it right. Thank you. Oh, yeah, sure.
If you have questions, pull out your mobile app, or Laura, can I get you up here again? And somebody else who wants to do some tossing? All right, let's pop up the questions. We've got a couple.
Why is Kaiser opening up a med school? Will more innovative schools pop up, forcing the dinosaurs to close shop? It's very interesting. I haven't talked to the Kaiser people, at least their leadership, so I'm just telling you what I think. There are people in healthcare, leaders like Karen and many of you, who are thinking about the future. I didn't mean that to say everybody in healthcare is sort of out of it. And I do think, I have read a little bit, that they are thinking that sort of the way we're training our doctors is we're training them for yesteryear. It's not the future. It's not what I've been talking about here. And they need to try to do better. So I think that's part of it. Will more innovative schools pop up for it? See, this is a little hard because, you know, you can't just pop up medical schools every 2 minutes, right? It takes time, it takes money, and even once you do it, it takes several years, and there's only a small number of people that come out of any one school. And you think about the size of the problem, I think that's a limited way of dealing with this because we can only do so much so fast, and the problem is so big and only getting bigger. You know, every day, 11,000 people turn 65. Every single day. You know, the population is now 320 plus million people. There's only about 3 million core healthcare providers, about 300,000, 400,000 primary care docs, 2.6 million nurses, and 5,800 hospitals and health clinics. And now that's the core. They're being responsible for the health of everybody. So it's not physically possible using a medical school, only build more medical schools to ramp up that number fast enough to deal with the shortages from the aging out and the growing population. But at the same time, there's pushback, you know, from inside healthcare not to do that because that dilutes the product and lowers the income of those who are in it. So that's a solution, but only, I think, a long one or small one. Can we get a copy of your slides? Sure, I'll leave. They have them already, and you can have them. What are the considerations for doctors to offer care across state lines and across borders? This disruptive. So, you know, I'm gonna be a little tongue-in-cheek here. This question is actually precisely the reason I gave this talk this way, because in my view, too much. Now, I'm not saying it's not important. Please don't get me wrong. But too much of the telehealth conversation focuses on that. And it mires you down and you can't think about anything else. And you think about this is the only way it's going to be provided. I just gave you a half hour of how telehealth is going to be provided in the beginning, and insurance may not even be the dominant payer or player. And the healthcare system might not even control it. So that's not to make this question any easier, but I'm trying to say if we allow ourselves to just get stuck here, you're going to be left behind because the system is already going ahead. If you can cost shift between one part of your business and another and make the money up, particularly for self-insured large employers, what do you need insurance for? Right? If you can put in place incentives and programs that actually lower costs, and you're big enough like Google with more money than any other business in the world, what do you need insurance for? Especially when insurance is ripping you off too. So this is why telehealth, I didn't talk about it, but I implied it. Telehealth offers the opportunity for entirely new business models, and this is part of the disruption. The dominant players, healthcare system, is focused on keeping the system the way it is. They're making good money, but they're ignoring the possible new revenue models. Therefore, others will get them, and when the historic revenue models don't pan out anymore, there'll be a big problem. So I know that's not answering it, but we have to get beyond that. We have to get beyond that. It's to our own peril if we spend only and all of our time on that question. What are the key barriers you see in causing the latency in the adoption of these disruptive forces? That's a very interesting question, and it's complicated. It's a number of things, but you know, change is hard for everybody. It's just hard. But healthcare has been an insular sector for a long time, for which others said, oh, they're gods, don't do anything. But now we are living in a global world. We're having to respond to global pressures in a way we've never had to do it before. And these changes are difficult, and it's just that resistance. I mean, you know, the auto industry went through it, the banking sector went through it, everybody went through it. I mean, I think it's a sham that I can go anywhere in the world, any time of day and night, and know everything about my financial status by putting a little card in a machine, but I can't do that for healthcare. And healthcare is not more complicated, and no, that's really not true when you really understand it. And I've sat down and talked with and heard the guys who made that happen and the guys who made the internet happen, and they said, you know, we used to hear doctors say that, so we looked at it. It's not true. We at Google, they at Google, transport more health information than any healthcare establishment, and all of them put together at the same time, every single day.
Yes, thank you. I'm Najib Ibrahim from Telehealth Management based in Charlottesville, Virginia. We work in data analytics for telehealth, and we also do some ROI analysis. It's very interesting to see all these reflections about these technologies and how they're going to disrupt the healthcare space. But I would like to ask you questions about an integrated health information system for healthcare. So basically, I think I'm a big believer in terms of technology is going to disrupt healthcare, but I would like to know what you think about all these EMRs, all these financial systems. They don't talk to each other. The data is fractured. Basically, to sum it up in, I think, one sentence, the data is rich, but the information is very poor. And it's very important, I think, to have an integrated system where that information is actually as rich as the data. And this, I think, problem is caused by a number of factors, but I would love to hear from you what the role of the government is within this kind of dilemma and problem, because sure. I truly believe in data. I'm a data believer, but I also think with a fractured system where everybody's using and starting a new data infrastructure that doesn't talk to other data infrastructures, that is not, the data is not consistent, is very complex, very fractured. What's the role in government?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But it's also the reason why, again, I think healthcare is ripe for disruption. Because you really think that the whole world is just going to sit by and wait till healthcare figures it out? That's not happening now. That's not going to happen. In fact, that, somebody, if healthcare doesn't do it, somebody else will figure it out. And I remember the debates when electronic medical records were first coming out, and the debate is whether the patient should have access and who owns the data, and those things are still going on. But you know what? Patients are developing their own databases. And guess what? The studies are showing that they actually are pretty good. They have different stuff in them than what we put in ours, and sometimes those things are very valuable. The Fitbit example. I mean, the fact that healthcare can't do it doesn't mean it can't be done. And it doesn't mean that somebody else isn't trying. I actually now, having been at the FCC for a couple of years, when I started talking to them about this, this interoperability and all this problem, they were just dumbfounded. And I didn't get it at first. They were just dumbfounded. They said, well, what's the problem in healthcare? It was like, we did this years ago in the telecommunications industry. We did this years ago. And all the things I would tell them about the problems and the issues, they said, oh yeah, the TV providers, they said the same thing. It's going to destroy this and you can't talk and this, that. They said all of that. And we let them just go on and do it for a while. And guess what? They never came together to do it. You asked for the role of government. So eventually, because it actually was then hurting the consumer in the same way, I believe if healthcare doesn't do it, it actually will inhibit health outcomes among patients if it's not already. Then we had to step in and develop the standards for which everybody had to abide by. And guess what? It didn't stifle innovation, it didn't hurt consumers, it didn't do anything, and everybody's happy we did now. If healthcare doesn't do, and it's a little more complicated than that, but I'm at the point now where I actually believe healthcare doesn't really have the skill set to solve that problem. They think they do, but they don't. And because healthcare has been so powerful over these years, when we say we don't want your help, there's nothing anybody can do. So it's going to take an awakening either for, the FCC or somebody to say, boom, by law, you're going to have to do this, or healthcare say, come help us. We've got industries that have already done it, but healthcare is trying to reinvent the wheel and getting nowhere. The role of government might be to set the standards for which healthcare must be interoperable, and then let it go forward and happen. One more up here. You want to pick one?
Yeah. So where is the supply of providers going to come from to provide immediate access? Access is one thing, capacity is another.
Well, I think as I tried to illustrate to you today, in the past, healthcare providers were the bottleneck. They were the bottleneck to knowledge. They were the bottleneck to information. They were the bottleneck to resources. That's why technology is disruptive, because it's changing that. It's totally changing that. If in the past, before there was an internet and a Dr. Google, I had a medical question, I either had to go to medical school, learn how to read a medical textbook, or pay you. Now I just Google it. And millions of people are doing it. And so, and what even the healthcare system is admitting, that everything we do, you don't need to have an MD or an RN to do. And so more and more of that is being done by others. So the idea that everybody has to have a provider for everything health never was true. And this is making it a reality. And, you know, and this will also help us scale. I mean, telehealth resources, you know, will help us be able to be more efficient and do more with what we have. But it will also democratize knowledge of health knowledge and health services and who provides them and where they're provided. That's why I started with those examples. In a little while, Microsoft might be a healthcare organization. Google's already a healthcare organization. Read about what they are trying to do, and they are just as much an innovator as Johns Hopkins or some of the other places where you might work. So that's what I say. I don't think traditional healthcare will totally go away, because there will always be need for hands-on and surgeries and things like that. But the lockhold that we have on the whole, you know, what healthcare is, the whole wellness continuum, if we don't change, most of that will be done outside the healthcare system, and we will become highly trained technicians of medicines and surgeries and a few other things. Sure.
I email you the rest of the questions. Can you?
Sure, I could try to answer.